At the Feet of Divine Mother Sree Rama Devi by Mrs. T.N.K Nair. Audiobook Part 1. The Early Days. O adorable Mother, O thou self of everything, of whatever thing existing, at whatever place or time, whether cause or effect, thou art the power behind, how canst thou be praised? Brahma's Prayer. The day dawned in Mangalore, March 4th, 1911, a day like any other, yet like no other before or since. The Ashwini star, in ascendance, glowed with added lustre. Celestial grihas stood in auspicious positions, their head bowed in reverence. Devas and rishis rejoiced, and minstrels of heaven sang the praises of Devi. Humanity went its way, unknowing, uncaring. But the true Bhakta of God would have known that in that golden dawn, it was Vedic hymns and not bird song that filled the atmosphere. He would have known the feeling of jubilation, the aura of divinity, as if the whole world was waiting with bated breath. When at 12:45 in the house of Kudupi Gopalakrishna Shenai, a little girl was born to his wife Sree Devi. The parents named her Rama, she who was to suffuse the world with love and light. In that simple homestead, their arms cradled the baby, lovelier by far than the moon herself. Day by day, they watched her growing with sweet childhood, even as the lotus bud opens out in all its beauty. They heard her innocent prattle, merry and joyous interspersed, even then with the cadence of divine wisdom. Their hearts rejoiced when they fondled the little girl, for they were blessed with mystical experiences even before the divine birth. The lives of piety and devotion form, as it were, the background where divine chose to assume a human form. Let us pay our homage and reverence to the revered parents. I was not privileged to meet Mother's father, as he had passed away a few years before I came to Mother. But from all that I heard from Mother and others during my visits to Mangalore, I got the picture of a noble and enlightened person. How else could it be? God assumes a form only where there is truth and dharma. Gopalakrishna Shenai was a man of tapasya and great knowledge of scriptures, possessing in full measure qualities of truthfulness, humility, and noble conduct. Never once did he go back on a commitment he had made. His word, when he gave it, was absolute. Indeed, it is said, many who dismissed the Indian Puranas as myths reconsidered their stance after knowing him. They reckoned, if such a man of truth existed in the present day, then surely Harishchandra too must have. Many sought his help in times of trouble. With his absolute faith in God, at times the impossible was made possible. In those times, when skepticism was rampant and belief in God was at a low ebb, one might wonder how the father could accept that his child was divine. But just as a carpenter of Nazareth was forewarned many hundreds of years ago, Gopalakrishna Shenai too was prepared for the advent by many a rare spiritual experience. This endowed him with the perception that Durga, who was worshipped in his ancestral home from time immemorial, had assumed the Saguna form as his daughter. His faith was such that the veil of Maya never deluded him. From the time of her birth, this faith grew in intensity and endured till the last moment of his life. Mystic events surrounded the child as she grew up, and the father inferred this as further undeniable proofs of her divinity. Sometime before the birth of his daughter, an incident took place, the significance of which he realized only later. One morning, while he was sitting in his shop, a sannyasin appeared suddenly seeking alms of him. Charity and hospitality were Gopalakrishna Shennai's motto in life, so paying obeisance, he offered alms. The sannyasin gently said it was food he needed. As he could not leave the shop unattended, he called someone else to take the sannyasin to a nearby hotel and give him a sumptuous meal. Pleased with such open-handed generosity, the sannyasin blessed him thus: "O fortunate one, thrice blessed are you, for you will be the father of your chosen deity. The blessings of Durga be ever upon you." In later years, watching his daughter's purity, aura of divinity, and her deep absorption and love for all creatures, he was to remember again and again the sannyasin's words. If he was aware of his daughter's true nature, why then, you may ask, did he keep it to himself? This was because he realized that there are preordained times and places for such revelation in the divine plan. He knew that if prematurely revealed, it would only cause mockery and disbelief. But for him, that dynamic faith was the pulsating undercurrent of his noble life. When little Rama was 9 years old, the family set off on a pilgrimage to all the important shrines of South India. The father watched with wonder the ecstatic devotion that overpowered the little girl in the shrines. The most memorable visit was the one to Mathura Meenakshi temple. As they entered the great temple along with beautifully sculptured passages, Rama suddenly left her father's side and ran through the unfamiliar passages straight to the inner shrine. After a frantic search, the father found her still and absorbed before the shrine of Devi Meenakshi. The girlish figure with her inner radiance was like a little goddess. Her father could see she was in the spell of a great experience. In that jostling crowd, many gathered to watch the little figure. After a long while, she came back to normalcy, and the father gently took her away. In later years, referring to this mystic experience, Mother once said, "The moment we entered the temple, I was drawn to the inner shrine. When I saw the idol of Devi, a flood of light emerged from me and fell on the image. In that effulgent light, I saw the image come to life with heavenly beauty. As a deep sense of identification with the goddess rose in me, The light re entered my being. The consciousness of this body left me, and I remembered no more. Once, when Rama was 10, her father took her to the Padavu hill near Mangalore. The hillside was covered with trees and boulders. The father thought of resting for some time near the foot of the hill, but the little girl sped like a deer through the tangled path to the crest of the hill. When the father reached there, the sheer poetry of the scene before him made him breathless. He saw the little one seated on a rock, blissfully merged in deep meditation. All around was the fresh beauty of nature, and the wind wafted caressingly over the child. Her face and form glowed rosy, gently touched by the rays of the setting sun. As he drank in the scene, an awareness came to the father that she had a great mission to fulfill, and that infinite power slumbered in that little form. Unwilling to break the magic spell of the moment, he too sat there in meditation, and later, still in silence, the father and child wended their way home. During my visits to Mangalore, I was able to gain more details of Mother's earlier life from some of the older disciples and members of the family. It was wonderful and inspiring, bringing before my vision the perfection of Mother's childhood days. Each incident was resplendent with the power of divinity. The Father alone understood the significance then. To many others, it was hidden behind the veil of Maya. One evening, when Rama was about 10 years old and studying in the 4th class, she returned from school and found all the inmates in the house had gone out. When she went into the bathroom, she found her old maidservant lying on the ground. She was shivering with fever and on the verge of becoming unconscious. This servant had been with them for years. Rama's heart melted with pity on seeing her condition. She quickly went to the kitchen and made some tea for the servant. Then she brought some cooling balm and gently rubbed it on her forehead, repeating the divine name. She covered the maid with a blanket and tucked her in comfortably. As she looked around, she saw a big heap of clothes for washing. She knew that the servant was too sick to do the washing, and so her mother would be burdened with the heavy work. With alacrity, the childish hands set to work. She drew pots of water from the well, all in an incredibly short time. After seeing that the servant was comfortable, she went up to her room. Later, when the old servant recited to the mother all that had happened, she was astonished as to how such a small child could do so much work so quickly and carry water in the heavy brass pot. In the extraordinary lives of God men, each incident, trifling or otherwise, is of immense value, as they have moral and spiritual lessons of humanity. Though they live in this world, yet they do not belong here. Their actions have a mystic, subtle meaning which often eludes our common grasp. To give a correct evaluation of such happenings is indeed difficult, and it is possible only after a passage of time. It is said that even Swami Vivekananda was reluctant to write about his master, as he felt he could not portray fully the reality of that pure and perfect life. We can only try to picture the sweet and holy childhood of Divine Mother, of a lovely little girl going about the house like a radiant sunbeam, warming all who came in contact with her. That life a poem of the infinite, shedding its heavenly rhythm on many an unconscious heart. When those gentle eyes gazed innocently at broken, sorrowing hearts, divine mercy softly smoothed and irradiated those agonized souls. Who knew then that the mission of divine regeneration had already begun? Let us envisage the picture of a winsome little girl going to the school with a school bag over one shoulder and a small bottle of water in the other hand. In that school, there was a teacher who taught in a higher class. She was a widow, afflicted with disease and without any money. She felt that she was a burden to her family. Every morning on her way to school, she would stand for a few minutes before a temple of Devi and pray for succor with tears in her eyes. Each moment of life was an agony for her. One day, as she was sitting in her classroom, she caught sight of a little girl standing quietly near a pillar. It was an interval between classes, and all round there was the din of children playing and shouting. In the midst of it all stood this girl of great charm and grace. The rose knows not its beauty, but its fragrance attracts the senses. The sorrowing woman felt drawn to that little girl. Their eyes met. As the light radiates spontaneously from the sun, so also the teacher felt a ray of sunshine piercing her heart. She beckoned the child to come to her. Smiling artlessly, the little girl came near the teacher. Overcome by desire to fondle the child, she drew the child to her and gently inquired in what class she was studying. As never before in her life, the teacher felt a joy and peace as she embraced the little one. A few seconds later, the bell rang and the child went away to her class. Returning home, the teacher felt a strange peace and exhilaration, and the child's pure face was ever before her. She began to wait for the child, who used to come out to the veranda during the interval. The teacher would talk to her for few minutes every day. Inexplicably, she felt as if a great burden was being lifted from her. She began to pray that she may become the teacher of the class in which the little girl studied. By some divine grace, this too was made possible. The teacher thought that the Devi, whom she worshipped, was answering her prayers. Her whole outlook changed, and her life was transformed to one of peace, devotion, and health. It was many years later, when she was an old woman, that she came to know that Mother, as a great teacher of humanity, was recognized by many as a supreme power. Then she related her story to Mother's devotees and said, "You all are realizing her divinity and her regenerating power only now. But when she was only 10 years old, she lifted me from ignorance and the toils of samsara. I realized then that she was Devi herself, and to this day she is enshrined in my heart. The lotus palms of the little child lifted me from the dark depths of hell itself. Ah, how that child's eyes rained mercy on me. I soon realized that the Devi I worshipped in the temple and she were one. Once at school, it happened that her friend's water bottle became empty. During the interval, the child requested Rama to accompany her to a nearby house to get some water. It was her habit never to stir out of the school during school hours. But to help her friend, she accompanied her. The house was that of a lady whose son had died of typhoid. She was sitting on the steps weeping disconsolately, neither looking about or noticing the world around. Rama was standing near the steps while her friend went to get water. Suddenly the lady looked around and saw the little girl. It is said even from childhood, Mother's heart melted in compassion whenever she saw sorrowing hearts, and her look mirrored God's compassion. The weeping one's gaze was riveted on the child's face. In her heart, agitation and sorrow ceased, and she felt she was being gathered to some source of peace. The children returned to the school. From the next day onwards, the lady stood by a hedge near the gate to catch a glimpse of the little girl. The mere sight of the girl comforted her, and always the child smiled at her bewitchingly. So great was the attraction she felt for the child that one day the lady prepared a delicacy, a favorite with her son, and waited impatiently for the girl to come. As soon as she saw her, the lady lovingly called her to her side and offered the sweet to the child. Tenderly embracing the lady, the child put a morsel of the sweet into the mother's mouth. For a second, the lady had the vision of the departed son being there and offering her the sweet. From that moment, she found that the sharp pangs of sorrow were appeased and that she could carry on in life with perfect resignation. It was many years later that she related this incident. Sree Devi, the mother, often found her daughter absorbed in meditation, and this puzzled and worried her very much. The child was always seeking solitary places. One day, when Sree Devi was cooking, her daughter-in-law came to get something from the storeroom. It was a dark room with no lights, and as she was groping on the shelf, she felt she touched some live being. Frightened, she ran out, and getting a light, she came back to the room with the father and mother. They were astounded to find their little girl seated there, wrapped in meditation. Her lustrous form reminded them of that great child devotee, Dhruva. Alongside her love of meditation and solitude, there was another facet to the child's personality. She was happy to do any work and in an amazingly short time could do an incredible amount of work with ease. She was alert and never missed an opportunity to help others. She was only 9 when this incident occurred. One day, the mother and other ladies of the house had to go out for some function in the afternoon. They planned to return and prepare tiffin before the father returned in the evening, but they were unavoidably detained. When the child Rama returned from the school, she found her mother away. The rice for the doshas was not ground. She knew that her father would be home soon for his evening meal. In a trice, she set about grinding the rice. The stone grinder was bigger than the child, but that did not deter her. After grinding the dough with great dexterity, she made doshas, each one a perfect round, and stacked them neatly on a plate by the fire. By the time the mother arrived, flustered and worried as to how she was going to make the tiffin in time, the child was busy with her homework. Great was Sree Devi's astonishment on finding the doshas. In her simple way, she thought it was a miracle of God and said so to her husband when he came home. But the father, with his illumined vision, knew better. He went at once to where his little daughter was sitting and without saying anything, took her hands in his to see if the stone grinder had hurt her tender palms. Charanam Sharanam Ramambike Charanam Sharanam Trayambage